The dining room glowed with candlelight, the air thick with the scent of vanilla cake and red wine, laughter bouncing off the walls as my family clinked glasses around the long oak table. My 70th birthday was supposed to be a milestone, a moment to feel cherished, but I stood at the head of the table, my hands smoothing my lavender dress, my short silver hair catching the light, my hazel eyes scanning faces that barely met mine. Plates were piled with food I'd spent days preparing: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans glistening with butter, but no one noticed the effort, their voices loud with stories that skipped over me. At 70, I'd been the family's anchor for decades, yet tonight, I was a shadow, my birthday cake untouched, its candles burned low. My daughter, Ellen, was laughing with her husband, her phone glowing as she scrolled. My son, Michael, argued politics with his cousin, their voices drowning out the soft jazz I'd chosen. A banner read, "Happy 70th, Mom," in glittery letters, but it sagged, ignored like the photo albums I'd set out, pictures of our family trips, my years teaching, my late husband, Tom. I'd hoped they'd see me, the woman who'd planned their lives, but they didn't. I cut the cake myself, the knife scraped loud, the frosting sweet but heavy on my tongue. I smiled, my lips tight, my heart sinking like a stone in the lake I'd once loved. I slipped to the kitchen, the linoleum cool under my flats, the air sharp with lemon cleaner. My fingers brushed the gold locket around my neck, Tom's gift, its weight a reminder of his voice. "You're my spark, Maggie." He'd seen me, always, but without him, and now with my family's chatter fading behind the door, I felt like the mother who cooked, who listened, who vanished into their needs. I'd spent years teaching, raising Ellen and Michael, thinking love meant giving everything, but tonight, it felt like I'd given myself away. "Mom, you okay?" Ellen called, poking her head in, her dark hair falling over her shoulder, her smile quick but distracted. "Fine, dear," I said, my voice thin, forcing a smile. "Just cleaning up." "Great party," she said, already turning back to the table, her phone buzzing. I nodded to the empty air, my throat tight, the sponge heavy in my hand. "Great, Maggie. Always fine, always there, never truly seen." I stepped outside, the night air crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine from the trees beyond our yard. The stars were faint, dimmed by city lights, and I leaned against the porch railing, its wood smooth under my palms. I caught my reflection in the window-lined face, hazel eyes tired but sharp, a woman who'd given her heart to a family that moved on without her. I thought of my sister, Ruth, how we'd sit by Willow Lake as girls, her laugh bright as she'd say, "Maggie, you're enough just being you." I'd forgotten that, buried under years of hosting and helping. I'd planned this party to feel loved, but it showed me how small I'd become, not to them, but to myself. I walked to the garden, the grass damp under my flats, the air cool with the scent of roses I'd tended. I thought of Tom, how we'd dance under the stars, his hand warm in mine, the lake's ripples in the distance. I'd loved its calm, its quiet beauty, but I'd stopped seeking it, too busy with family to feel alive. Here, with the party's noise distant, I felt a spark, small but sharp. I wasn't enough to them, not to Ellen, not to Michael, but I could be enough for me. I'd read about Willow Lake, a town hours away, with quiet shores and simple streets. It was a whim, a whisper, but it felt like a call to start again. I returned to the house, the dining room's glow spilling out, but it wasn't mine anymore. I wasn't angry, not really, it was quieter, a realization that I'd been waiting for them to see me, to give back the worth I'd poured into their lives. They hadn't, and maybe they wouldn't. I thought of Ruth again, her voice clear. "Go find your light, Maggie." I dimmed myself too long, shrinking to fit their needs. Now, with the stars above and the locket cool against my neck, I felt ready to try. I didn't know what Willow Lake held, but I was done being the unseen mother, the forgotten host. I was Margaret, and I was ready to find her again. The living room was still, lit only by the soft glow of a floor lamp, casting shadows over the coffee table where I sorted through old photo albums and recipe cards, their edges worn from years of touch. The air smelled of dust and the faint rosewater of a candle I'd lit to calm my racing heart. At 70, I'd spent decades in this house, cooking for Ellen and Michael, loving Tom, teaching generations, but last night's birthday party, its laughter bypassing me, my albums ignored, had left me feeling like a guest in my own life. My short silver hair was loose, brushing my neck, and I wore a soft shawl over a cotton nightgown, its hem frayed from restless nights. My hazel eyes caught the lamp's light, reflecting a woman ready to reclaim her spark. I opened an album, its pages crinkling, and saw a photo of Tom and me by Willow Lake, his arm around me, my smile bright. My throat tightened, and I set it down, my fingers lingering on the glossy surface, cool and smooth. I'd been his spark, Ellen's, Michael's, thinking love meant giving all of myself. But last night, cutting my own cake, I'd felt dim, like a fire banked too long. I thought of Ruth, my sister, her hands braiding my hair as kids, her voice saying, "Keep a piece of you for you, Maggie." I'd laughed, but I hadn't listened, too busy being the mother who hosted, the teacher who stayed late, the widow who carried on. I pulled a small suitcase from the closet, its zipper stiff and packed deliberately cardigans, slacks, a journal I hadn't written in since Tom died. Each item a quiet promise to myself. The act felt bold, like I was 20 again, sneaking off with Tom to watch the lake's sunrise, his laugh warm in my ears. But this was for me, not him, not Ellen, not Michael. I'd read about Willow Lake, a town hours away, with gentle shores and quiet paths. It was a name, a memory, but it felt like a call, offering space to find Margaret, the woman I'd buried under years of service. "You're up late," Michael's voice came from the hall, his silhouette in the doorway, his hair messy from sleep, his flannel shirt untucked. He'd stayed over after the party, his concern a weight I both cherished and resisted. "Packing," I said, my voice firm, folding a scarf. "I need a change." He frowned, his eyes searching mine. "Mom, this is sudden." "You sure?" I nodded, my smile small but steady. His worry was kind, but it came too late, like a light after the dark had settled. He hugged me, brief and awkward, then left, promising to check in, leaving me with the suitcase and my resolve. I sat at the kitchen table, the candles glow soft, and opened my journal, its pages blank but inviting. I wrote, "I'm choosing me." The words looked small, but they felt like a seed, planted in new soil. I thought of Tom, how he'd call me his lake light for glowing through storms. I'd forgotten how to glow for myself, caught up in being mother, teacher, widow. But Willow Lake, with its promise of calm waters and open skies, felt like a place I could try. I walked to the window, the glass cool against my palm, the yard dark beyond. The stars were faint, hidden by city glow, but they were there, steady as ever. I remembered a night with Tom, years ago, when we'd sat by the lake, his hand in mine, saying, "You're stronger than you think, Maggie." I'd smiled, thinking he was teasing, but now, with the suitcase packed and the party's echoes fading, I believed him. I wasn't running away, I was running toward something, a life where I could be more than the mother who cooked, who smiled through silence. I carried the suitcase to my car, the driveway's gravel crunching under my slippers, the night air cool with a hint of pine. The engine hummed as I started it, a sound both familiar and thrilling. I thought of Ellen, how she'd looked at me with distraction, and Michael, his eyes on his phone. I loved them, always would, but I couldn't keep dimming for them. I'd call, I'd visit, but first I needed to find myself, to see if Margaret was still there, under the years of giving. I drove into the night, the road stretching open, the headlights carving a path through the dark. The radio played softly, an old song Tom loved, and I hummed along, my voice rusty but mine. Willow Lake was hours away, a dot on the map, but it felt like a beginning. I didn't know what I'd find, maybe nothing, maybe everything, but I was ready to look. The stars faded as the sky lightened, and I felt a spark, small but fierce, like I was waking up after a long, quiet sleep. The Willow Lake shore stretched wide before me, its gentle waves lapping at the pebbled beach, their soft murmur mingling with the rustle of tall reeds in the breeze, and I stood at the water's edge, my loafers sinking slightly into the damp gravel. The air crisp with the scent of fresh water and pine. At 70, I'd never traveled so far alone, and this lakeside town, with its quiet docks and cedar-shingled cabins, felt like a new chapter, both daunting and inviting. My short silver hair was tucked under a wide-brimmed hat, my hazel eyes scanning the horizon, and I wore a soft cardigan over a cotton blouse and slacks, my hands gripping a small duffel bag, fingers stiff from the drive. I'd left after my 70th birthday party left me unseen, and now, in Willow Lake, I was searching for Margaret, the woman I'd dimmed under decades of giving. I found my rental, a modest cabin with weathered cedar siding and a porch facing the lake, its railing rough under my touch. The key was in a lockbox, and the door creaked as I opened it, revealing a cozy room smelling of pine and faint lavender from a sachet on the table. The furniture was simple, a worn armchair, a wooden table with scratches, a bed with a faded quilt. I set my duffel down, the floorboard sighing, and ran my fingers along a windowsill, its wood cool and slightly damp. This wasn't home, but it was a space to breathe, a place where I could be more than the mother who cooked, the teacher who stayed late, the widow who faded. I walked into town, the gravel path crunching under my loafers, the air alive with the hum of waves and the distant call of a loon. The main street was lined with a cafe, a general store, and a dock where small boats swayed, their ropes creaking, the air tinged with fish and damp wood. I paused at a bookstore, its window displaying journals with leather covers, and bought one, its pages smooth under my fingers. I thought of Tom, how he loved the lake, pulling me to its shore to watch the sunset, his voice warm. "See the light, Maggie, it's yours." I'd stopped seeing light after he died, too busy with Ellen and Michael, but now, with the lake's rhythm in my ears, I wanted to try again. "New here?" a voice asked. It was Clara, a shopkeeper in her 60s with warm brown eyes and a gray braid, her hands arranging books, her apron dusted with coffee grounds. "Just arrived," I said, my voice hesitant, clutching the journal. "Looking for something new." "Willow Lake's good for new," she said, her smile soft. "It listens." I nodded, her words settling like a pebble in my pocket, and walked on, the town's hum fading behind me. I found a cafe by the dock, its windows streaked with lake mist, and ordered tea, its warmth soothing as I sat at a wooden table, its surface sticky with sap. The air smelled of brewed leaves and grilled sandwiches, and I opened my journal, writing about the lake's calm, the pencils scratch a quiet comfort. The town moved around me, fishermen chatting, a child skipping by, and I felt out of place, my hat too prim, my hands too soft. But there was freedom in being unknown, no one expecting me to host or fix or stay late. Back at the cabin, I sat on the porch, the lake's murmur steady, the air cooling with the scent of water and cedar. The sky was turning pink, the stars just visible, and I thought of Ellen, her distracted smile at the party, and Michael, his quick concern. I'd left a note saying I'd call, but part of me wondered if they'd noticed I was gone. Here, though, with the lake's gentle song, I didn't need their eyes to feel alive. I was starting to see myself not as the mother who gave, but as Margaret who could create. I opened my journal again, the locket from Tom cool against my neck, its gold glinting. I wrote about the lake, its waves small but constant, and Clara's words, simple but kind. I thought of Ruth, my sister, how she'd love this lake, saying, "Find your calm, Maggie, it's waiting." I wasn't sure I belonged here yet, but I was willing to try. The lake stretched wide before me, its ripples alive, and I felt a spark, small but real. I was afraid, but I was in Willow Lake, and that was enough for now. The Willow Lake shore shimmered under a soft morning sun, its pebbles smooth beneath my bare feet, the water's gentle lapping mingling with the chirp of sparrows in the reeds, and I walked slowly, the air fresh with the scent of damp earth and wild mint. At 70, I'd been in this lakeside town for a week, and its rhythm, the lake's quiet pulse, the breeze's soft hum, was stirring a warmth I hadn't felt in years. My short silver hair was loose, catching the light, my hazel eyes tracing the water's edge, and I wore a light cardigan over a cotton blouse and skirt, my hands holding a leather-bound journal, its cover soft from use. I'd come to Willow Lake after my 70th birthday party left me unseen, and now, With the lake's calm, I was finding small joys to claim as Margaret, not just the mother who gave everything. I stopped by a cluster of smooth stones, their surfaces cool and slick, and sat on a fallen log, its bark rough under my touch. I opened my journal, writing about the lake's ripples, the pencil's scratch blending with the water's murmur. The act felt like breathing again, a way to see the world through my eyes, not Ellen's needs or Michael's demands. I thought of Tom, how we'd walk this lake as newlyweds, his laugh warm as he'd say, "Find the beauty, Maggie, it's everywhere." I'd stopped looking for beauty after he died, too busy cooking and teaching, but now, with the lake's rhythm in my heart, I felt it again, faint but alive. I wandered into town, the gravel path warm under my sandals, the air carrying the rich scent of fresh bread from a bakery. I stopped there, its window steamed, and ordered a blueberry muffin, its warmth crumbling on my tongue. The wooden counter was worn, grounding under my fingers, and I wrote in my journal about the muffin's sweetness, the lake's calm. The simplicity of it, the muffin, the journal, the water's distant hum, felt like a gift, a way to choose joy for myself, not just serve it to others. I thought of Ruth, my sister, her hands rolling dough, her voice saying, "Hold the sweet things, Maggie, they're yours." I was holding them now, small but bright, like stones by the shore. "You're settling in," Clara said, the shopkeeper from the bookstore, her gray braids swinging as she carried a tray of pastries, her smile warm. She sat across from me, her apron dusted with flour. "Trying to," I said, showing her my journal, my voice lighter than I meant. "This place, it's waking me up." "The lake does that," she said, her eyes crinkling. "It knows how to teach." Her words wrapped around me, soft but steady, like a ripple on the water, and I nodded, grateful for her kindness. I spent the afternoon exploring, the town revealing itself in quiet wonders, a child's kite soaring above the dock, the scent of lavender from a shop's open door, the lake's steady pulse. I stopped by a wooded path, its edges lined with wildflowers, their petals swaying in the breeze. I leaned against a fence, the wood cool under my palms, and watched the lake shimmer, its surface catching the sun. I thought of Ellen, her distracted glance at the party, and Michael, his quick concern. I'd left without much explanation, just a note, and wondered if they'd call. But here, with the lake moving free and calm, I didn't need their eyes to feel real. I was starting to see Margaret, the woman who wrote, who tasted muffins, who walked alone and felt alive. Back at the cabin, I sat on the porch, the lake's murmur soft, the air cooling with the scent of water and pine. I opened my journal and wrote about the path, its wildflowers delicate but stubborn, like the woman I was becoming. I wrote about the muffin, the lake, Clara's words, each entry a step toward claiming this place. I thought of Tom again, how he'd loved my quiet moments, calling them my lake light glow. I'd thought my glow wasn't giving, but now I saw it could be this, choosing to notice, to write, to keep something for myself. The stars came out, sharp against the dark, and I stayed on the porch, the quilt from the cabin around my shoulders. Willow Lake wasn't home yet, but it was a place where I could grow, where I could find joy in small things, a journal, a muffin, a kind word. I wasn't whole, but I was closer, and that was enough for now. The lake sang its gentle song, its ripples steady, and I smiled, my pencil still in hand, ready for whatever came next. The Willow Lake dock stretched out over the water, its weathered planks creaking under my sandals, the air alive with the scent of fresh fish and the faint sweetness of blooming honeysuckle from the shore. At 70, I'd been in this lakeside town for 2 weeks, and its rhythm, the lake's gentle lapping, the loon's soft calls, was weaving itself into me, stirring a sense of belonging I hadn't felt since Tom's days. My short silver hair was tied back with a scarf, my hazel eyes catching the sunlight, and I wore a soft cardigan over a cotton blouse and skirt, my hands holding my journal, its leather cover now creased from daily use. I'd come to Willow Lake after my 70th birthday party left me invisible, and now, with the lake's calm and new faces, I was finding not just joy but connection, a place for Margaret to grow. I walked to the general store, its bell jingling as I entered, the air warm with the scent of coffee and cedar. Clara, the shopkeeper, was there, her gray braid neat, her smile welcoming as she restocked shelves. She'd become a familiar face, her bookstore a daily stop, and her warmth was pulling me out of my shell. I bought a postcard with a lake view, its colors vivid, and sat at a counter, writing in my journal about the dock's sway, the water's shimmer. The act was becoming a ritual, a way to claim this place as mine, not as the mother who served or the teacher who planned, but as Margaret, who could belong. I wandered to the dock later, where small boats bobbed, their ropes taut. There I met Henry, a retired fisherman in his late 60s with a weathered face and a quiet chuckle, his hands sorting fishing lines, his flannel shirt patched at the elbows. I paused, drawn to his steady calm, and opened my journal, writing about his hands, their lines like the lake's ripples. I thought of Tom, how he loved watching fishermen, saying, "They know the water's heart, Maggie." I'd stopped seeking hearts after he died, too busy with Ellen and Michael, but now, with Henry's quiet work and the lake's hum, I felt them stirring again. "Got away with words," Henry said, glancing at my journal, his voice low, his eyes kind under a faded cap. "Just trying," I said, my voice shy but warm, showing him the page. "It's new for me." "News good," he said, his smile crinkling his face. "Keeps you alive." His words landed softly, like a leaf on the water, and I smiled, feeling seen in a way I hadn't at the birthday party. Clara joined us later, her apron swapped for a shawl, and we sat on a bench. The docks would warm under us, the air carrying the scent of fish and lake water. They shared stories, her store's history, his years fishing, and I listened, my journal open, feeling a spark of belonging. I told them about the party, how my album sat untouched, my voice steady but tinged with old hurt. They nodded, their eyes gentle, not pitying but understanding, and I felt a weight lift, like I wasn't just the woman who'd taught or cooked, but someone who could be known. I walked back to the cabin, the sun high, the air warm with the scent of reeds and pine. The town was alive, kids laughing, boats creaking, and I felt part of it, not just a visitor. I thought of Ellen, how she'd called yesterday, her voice cautious, asking if I was okay. I'd said yes, but I hadn't told her how Willow Lake was waking me, how Clara's smile and Henry's quiet wisdom were showing me I could be more than the mother, the teacher, the widow. I'd spent years giving my light to others, thinking it was enough, but here, with new faces, I was learning to shine for myself. Back at the cabin, I sat on the porch, the lake's murmur soft, the air cooling with the scent of water and cedar. I opened my journal and wrote about Henry's hands, Clara's warmth, the way the lake felt like a friend. I thought of Ruth, my sister, her voice saying, "Find your people, Maggie, they'll lift you." I was finding them now in Willow Lake's small moments, in the kindness of strangers who saw me, not for what I did, but for who I was. The stars came out, bright against the dark, and I stayed on the porch, the quilt around my shoulders. Willow Lake was becoming a home, not just a place, and these people, Clara, Henry, were its heartbeat. I wasn't whole yet, but I was closer, my heart lighter, as Henry said. The lake sang its steady song, and I smiled, my pencil still in hand, ready for whatever came next. The Willow Lake cabin was quiet that evening, the air heavy with the scent of cedar and the faint must of old letters I'd found in a box under the bed, their envelopes brittle and yellowed. A storm was brewing outside, rain pattering on the roof, the lake's waves slapping harder against the shore, and I sat at the wooden table, a single lamp casting a warm glow over a locket I'd pulled from the box, its gold surface etched with a tiny rose. At 70, I'd been in this lakeside town for 3 weeks, finding light in Clara's kindness, Henry's wisdom, and my journal, but this locket, a gift from my sister Ruth, stirred a pain I'd buried since we'd drifted apart. My short silver hair was loose, my hazel eyes misty, and I wore a soft cardigan over a cotton dress, the locket cool in my hands, my fingers tracing its familiar shape. I opened it, the hinge creaking, revealing a faded photo of Ruth and me as girls, our smiles bright by the lake. My throat tightened as I remembered her laugh, her voice saying, "You're my best friend, Maggie." We'd been close once, sharing secrets by Willow Lake, but life, my teaching, her travels, my family, had pulled us apart, our calls growing rare, her letters unanswered in my rush to be mother, teacher, wife. The birthday party, with its untouched albums, had shown me how I'd faded, and now, with the locket's weight, I saw I'd lost not just myself but her too. I thought of Tom, how he'd nudge me to call her, saying, "Family's your anchor, Maggie." I'd nodded, but I'd let Ruth slip, too busy giving to others. I stood, the chair scraping the floor, and walked to the window, the glass cold and streaked with rain. The lake churned beyond, its surface dark and restless, mirroring the ache in my chest. I'd given everything cooking for Ellen, planning for Michael, grading papers late, thinking it was love, but it had left me hollow, a shell polished by duty. The locket reminded me of the Margaret I'd been joyful, laughing with Ruth by the water, but also of the years I'd spent as the widow who grieved alone, the mother who fixed, the sister who forgot to call. Willow Lake was helping me find myself, but this locket was a wave, pulling me back to old regrets. "You okay in the storm?" Henry called, his voice muffled through the door, his raincoat dripping as he stood on the porch, his weathered face kind under a soaked cap. He'd stopped by to check on me, his presence steady. "It's stirring things up," I said, holding the locket, my voice thin against the rain's drum. "Found something from my sister." He nodded, his eyes gentle. "The lake digs up old things. Let it." His words were simple, like a buoy in the storm, and I smiled faintly as he left, promising tea tomorrow. I sat again, the lamp's light soft, and held the locket, its photo a bittersweet mirror. I thought of the birthday party, how I'd felt invisible, and Ellen's brief call, her voice distant. I'd given them everything, thinking it was love, but the locket showed me I'd given myself away, too, even to Ruth, who'd once known me best. Willow Lake, Clara's warmth, Henry's quiet wisdom, my journal, was teaching me I could be more than duty. I wasn't erasing Tom or my children, but I was learning to carry them differently, to make room for Margaret, the sister, the woman who could still shine. I opened my journal, the storm's roar softening, and wrote about the locket, its rose etching, the lake's restless waves. The act felt like a bridge, connecting my past to this moment, regret to hope. I thought of Ruth again, how we'd skip stones by the lake, her voice saying, "You're enough, Maggie, just you." I'd thought my worth was in giving, but now I saw it could be in remembering, in reaching out. I wasn't ready to call her yet, but the thought felt closer, like a star breaking through clouds. The rain slowed, the air cooler now, carrying the scent of wet cedar and lake water. I stepped onto the porch, the quilt around my shoulders, the lake's rhythm steady despite the storm. Willow Lake wasn't a cure, but it was a place where I could face my ghosts and still find light. Clara's smile, Henry's kindness, my own words in my journal. I wasn't free of the past, but I was stronger, ready to keep going, to find the woman I was meant to be. The Willow Lake path wound through tall pines, their needles carpeting the ground, the air rich with the scent of sap and damp earth. And I sat on a wooden bench overlooking the water, its surface rippling under a soft morning breeze. At 70, I'd been in this lakeside town for a month, finding light in Clara's warmth, Henry's wisdom, and my journal, but the locket from Ruth, found last night, had stirred me to look deeper, to uncover the Margaret I'd lost under years of giving. My short silver hair was tied back with a scarf, my hazel eyes tracing the lake's gentle waves, and I wore a soft cardigan over a cotton blouse and slacks, my hands holding my journal, its pages now thick with thoughts. The birthday party had shown me I'd faded, and now, with the lake's steady rhythm, I was peeling back layers of sacrifice to find who remained. I opened my journal, writing about the pines, their shadows long and cool, the pencil's scratch blending with the lake's distant hum. The act was a mirror, showing me a woman who'd poured herself into others, teaching late, cooking for Ellen and Michael, loving Tom, thinking it was love, but losing herself in the process. The locket's photo, Ruth and me by the lake, reminded me of the Margaret I'd been, carefree, laughing, whole. I'd buried her under lesson plans, family dinners, and grief, becoming the steady one who never asked for more. I thought of Tom, his hand on mine by this lake, saying, "You're my spark, Maggie, don't let it go." I'd nodded, but I'd measured my worth by others' needs, and Willow Lake was showing me that wasn't enough. I walked into town, the paths gravel warm under my sandals, the air carrying the faint scent of grilled fish from a lakeside stall. The main street was alive with morning bustle, shopkeepers sweeping, boats creaking, and I stopped at Clara's bookstore, its shelves heavy with novels and journals. She'd become a friend, her warmth a steady anchor, and I bought a pen, its weight solid in my hand, a small claim to this new life. I thought of the birthday party, how my album sat untouched, my years teaching reduced to a quick, great party, Mom. I'd been invisible there, but here, with Clara's nod and Henry's wave from the dock, I was starting to shine again, not for them, but for me. You look thoughtful, Clara said, arranging books, her gray braids swinging, her eyes sharp but kind. Digging deep, I said, my voice soft, showing her my journal. Trying to find me. The lake's good for that, she said, her smile warm. It shows you what's true. Her words settled like a soft ripple, and I nodded, carrying the pen back to my cabin. I sat on the porch, the lake's murmur steady, the air cooling with the scent of water and pine. I opened my journal and wrote about the bench, its wood worn but strong, like the woman I was uncovering. I wrote about the locket, Clara's words, the way the lake felt like a guide, leading me to question who I'd been. I'd spent decades being the anchor, teaching late, raising my children alone after Tom, grieving quietly, thinking it was strength. But strength wasn't just giving, it was claiming myself, too. Willow Lake, with its waves and kind faces, was showing me I could be Margaret, not just the roles I'd worn. I thought of Ellen and Michael, their brief calls, their voices polite but distant, and the party, where my albums were ignored. I'd poured my light into them, expecting it to reflect back, but it hadn't. The locket was a mirror, showing me the woman I'd been laughing with Ruth, dreaming by the lake, and the one I'd become, dimmed by duty. I wasn't angry, not anymore. It was quieter, a resolve to find the Margaret who could shine without needing others' eyes. Clara's bookstore, Henry's fishing lines, my journal, they were threads, weaving a life I chose. I walked to the shore, the sand cool under my feet, the waves curling gently now, their foam soft and white. I thought of Ruth again, how she'd sit by the lake, saying, "Your heart's big, Maggie, but save some for you." I was saving it now, in these moments of writing, noticing the pines, talking with friends. Willow Lake wasn't a cure, but it was a place to grow, to ask who I was when I wasn't giving. I wasn't whole yet, but I was closer, each word a step, each wave a whisper of truth. The stars began to show, sharp against the twilight, and I stayed on the porch, the quilt around my shoulders. I opened my journal again, the locket from Tom glinting, and wrote, "I'm finding her." The words felt like a promise, small but fierce. The lake sang its endless song, and I smiled, ready to keep digging, to claim the woman I was meant to be. The Willow Lake Community Center smelled of linseed oil and canvas, its air warm and slightly sharp, with sunlight filtering through tall windows, casting soft patterns on the hardwood floor. At 70, I'd been in this lakeside town for 5 weeks, finding myself through Clara's kindness, Henry's wisdom, and my journal, but the locket from Ruth had pushed me to seek more, to claim my voice in a new way. My short silver hair was tied back with a scarf, my hazel eyes focused, and I wore a cotton blouse under a soft cardigan, its sleeves dusted with paint as I stood before a canvas, brush in hand. The birthday party had shown me I'd faded, and now, joining this painting class, I was crafting not just art but courage, shaping Margaret into someone who could speak. The canvas was rough under my brush, the paint sliding in uneven strokes as I tried to capture the lake's shimmer, its blues and greens blending messily, but honestly. The act felt like my journal, a way to say I was here, not just the mother who cooked or the teacher who planned, but Margaret who could create. I thought of Tom, how he loved my small sketches, saying, "Your hands tell stories, Maggie." I'd stopped telling stories after he died, too busy with Ellen's needs, Michael's life, but here, with the paint's slick texture, I was finding them again. I thought of Ruth, her hands weaving flower crowns by the lake, her voice saying, "Make something yours, Maggie." This painting, flawed but mine, was a start. The class was small, a handful of locals chatting softly over their easels, their brushes dipping into jars of color. Clara had told me about it, her eyes bright, and I'd signed up, nervous but eager. I glanced around, seeing canvases of trees, boats, lives, and felt a spark of belonging, not just to Willow Lake, but to myself. I thought of the birthday party, how my album sat untouched, my years reduced to a quick, great party. I'd been invisible there, but here, with paint on my fingers and the lake's distant hum, I was visible, not to others, but to me. Coming along nicely, said Lila, the instructor, a woman in her 60s with short dark hair and a warm smile, her apron streaked with paint. She leaned over my canvas, her hands steady. It's a mess, I said, half laughing, my voice lighter, wiping paint from my hands. It's a beginning, she said, her eyes kind. That's where the beauty starts. Her words settled like a soft wave, and I nodded, my brush moving again, feeling bolder. After class, I walked to the lake, the grass soft under my sandals, the air carrying the scent of water and wildflowers. The waves curled gently, their foam white and soft, and I carried my canvas, still wet, wrapped in cloth. I sat on a bench, its wood smooth, and opened my journal, writing about the paint, its colors vivid like the lake's light. I thought of Ellen and Michael, their calls still brief, their voices cautious, and the party, where my efforts were unseen. I'd spent decades giving, teaching, raising, grieving, thinking it was enough, but this painting class, like my journal, was teaching me I could create for myself, could speak through color and lines. Back at the cabin, I set the canvas on the porch table, the lake's murmur steady, the air cooling with the scent of pine and water. I opened my journal and wrote about Lila's words, the paint's feel, the way the lake felt like a partner in my rediscovery. I thought of Tom again, how he'd loved my creations, calling them my lake light stories. I'd thought my stories were in giving, but now I saw they could be in making, in claiming my voice through each brushstroke, each word. The stars came out, sharp against the night, and I stayed on the porch, the quilt around my shoulders. Willow Lake was more than a place now, it was a canvas, with Clara's warmth, Henry's wisdom, and this class weaving me into it. I wasn't just the woman who'd taught or mourned. I was Margaret, shaping her courage, speaking through paint. I wasn't whole yet, but I was closer, each creation a step toward the woman I was meant to be. The Willow Lake Cafe was warm with the scent of brewed coffee and warm pastries, its windows fogged against the cool evening air, the soft clink of mugs blending with the lake's distant murmur. At 70, I'd been in this lakeside town for 6 weeks, finding myself through Clara's kindness, Henry's wisdom, and my painting, but today, Ruth was coming to visit, our first meeting since I'd left after my 70th birthday party. My short silver hair was tied back with a scarf, my hazel eyes nervous but hopeful, and I wore a soft cardigan over a cotton dress, my hands fidgeting with the gold locket around my neck, its rose etching cool under my fingers. The party had shown me I'd faded, and Willow Lake had helped me shine, but facing Ruth meant mending a bond strained by my giving and our distance. I sipped my tea, its warmth steadying me, and looked out the window, where the lake rippled under a gray sky, its waves calm but restless. Ruth and I had drifted since our youth, me pouring myself into teaching and my children, her traveling, our calls growing rare. The locket, with its photo of us by the lake, had stirred regret, reminding me how I'd let her slip, too busy being the mother, the teacher, the widow. I thought of Tom, how he'd urged me to call her, saying, "Ruth's your heart, Maggie." I'd nodded, but life had kept me from her, and now, with Willow Lake's rhythm in my veins, I wanted to rebuild, not as the sister who gave, but as Margaret, who could love honestly. The cafe door jingled, and Ruth stepped in, her graying blonde hair loose, her coat damp from drizzle, her green eyes scanning until they found me. She was 68, her face lined but warm, her smile cautious, like she wasn't sure who I'd become. I stood, my heart quick, and we hugged, her coat cool against my arms. We sat, the table small between us, and I felt the weight of years, our childhood by the lake, my years of duty, our silence after Tom's death, heavy but unspoken. "You look different," Ruth said, her voice soft, stirring her coffee, her eyes on the mug. "Willow Lake's changing me," I said, my voice steady but warm, touching the locket. "I needed to find myself." She nodded, her smile faint. "I wish I'd known you felt so gone." Her words stung, but they were honest, and I leaned forward, ready to meet her halfway. We talked slowly at first, the cafe's hum a gentle backdrop. I told her about the party, how my albums were ignored, how I'd felt invisible, my voice calm but raw. She listened, her eyes wide, and shared her own hurt, how my giving felt like distance, how she'd traveled to escape feeling left behind. I thought of Tom, how he'd sit with us by the lake, saying, "Love means space, Maggie." I'd held too tightly to Ellen and Michael, thinking it was love, but here, with the lake's rhythm outside, I saw I could love Ruth differently, as equals, as sisters. We laughed, a soft sound, over stories of our childhood pranks and cried when we spoke of Tom, his absence a shared ache. I showed her my journal, its pages filled with lake sketches and notes, each a piece of the Margaret I was finding. She traced a drawing of the dock, her smile small but real, and told me about her travels, her quiet life now, her own regrets. The cafe grew quieter, the air cooler now, carrying the scent of rain and coffee, and I felt a bridge forming, fragile but strong, like the locket's clasp. I wasn't erasing the years apart, but I was building something new with Ruth, with myself. We walked to the lake, the sand damp under our shoes, the waves soft now, their foam glowing in the dusk. I thought of the birthday party, how I'd waited for others to see me, and Ellen's calls, her voice distant. I'd given too much, expecting them to fill the space Tom left, but Willow Lake had taught me I could fill it myself, through painting, writing, friends. Ruth wasn't my light, but she was my sister, and I loved her enough to let her be, to meet her as Margaret, not just the giver. Back at the cabin, we sat on the porch, the lake's murmur steady, the air rich with pine and water. I gave her a small painting, a lake scene with uneven blues, and she held it, her eyes soft. I thought of Tom again, how he'd loved our lake talks, calling them our spark moments. I was making new moments now with Ruth, with myself. Willow Lake wasn't a cure, but it was a place to mend, to build bridges, to shine. The Willow Lake shore glowed under a late afternoon sun, its waves curling gently against the pebbled beach, their soft lapping blending with the distant laughter of children playing near the dock, the air sharp with the scent of fresh water and blooming wildflowers. At 70, I'd been in this lakeside town for 2 months, weaving a new life through Clara's warmth, Henry's wisdom, my painting, and the mended bond with Ruth, whose visit yesterday had left me lighter, whole in a way I hadn't expected. My short silver hair was loose, catching the breeze, my hazel eyes bright with peace, and I wore a cotton dress under a soft cardigan, my hands holding a small painting of the lake, its blues shimmering like the water. The birthday party had shown me I'd faded, but Willow Lake had helped me claim my light, shining as Margaret, a woman who chose herself. I walked along the shore, the pebbles cool beneath my bare feet, the lake's rhythm steady and soothing. I stopped by a small cove, its water clear, reflecting reeds and tiny fish, and knelt, setting the painting against a smooth stone, its colors vivid in the sunlight. It was a gift to the lake, a way to say I was here, not just surviving but thriving. I thought of Tom, his voice calling me his lake light, and how I'd lost that light, giving too much to Ellen, Michael, and my students. Willow Lake had given it back, through Clara's smile, Henry's stories, Ruth's laughter, my journal, and paintings. I'd come here unsure, but now, with the lake's gentle hum, I stood steady, my roots deep in this quiet town. I thought of Ruth, how we'd sat by the lake as girls, her voice saying, "You're enough, Maggie, just you." I'd bloomed here in Willow Lake's small moments, writing in my journal, tasting muffins, painting the lake's curves. The birthday party, with its ignored albums, felt like a distant echo, its sting softened by this place. I'd been invisible there, but here, with pain on my fingers and the lake's song in my ears, I was seen, not just by others, but by myself. I wasn't perfect, but I was whole, and that was enough. "You're shining today," Clara said, joining me, her gray braid loose, her shawl fluttering, her smile warm as she walked from her bookstore. Feeling it, I said, my voice steady, standing to hug her. "This place, it's home." "The lake knew you belonged," she said, her eyes crinkling. "We all did." Her words wrapped around me like a warm wave, and I smiled, my heart full. I walked to the dock, the planks creaking under my sandals, the air alive with the scent of fish and cedar. Henry was there, mending a net, his hands deft, his nod quiet but kind. I opened my journal, writing about the cove, its fish darting like thoughts, each word a thread in the life I'd built. I thought of Ruth, how we'd laughed and cried, rebuilding our bond as sisters, not just memories. She'd left this morning, promising to visit again, and I'd felt peace, knowing I loved her without needing her to complete me. Ellen and Michael had called, their voices warmer now, and I'd told them about the lake, my painting, my new home. Back at the cabin, I sat on the porch, the lake's murmur soft, the air cooling with the scent of pine and water. I opened my journal and wrote about the cove, its clarity like the Margaret I'd found. I wrote about Clara's words, Henry's nod, the painting I'd left, each a stone in my foundation. Willow Lake wasn't a cure, but a canvas where I'd painted a life, paintings, journals, friendships, a renewed bond with Ruth. I thought of Tom again, how he'd called my moments by the lake my spark stories. That spark was mine now, not in giving but in living, in choosing myself. The stars came out, bright against the dark, and I stayed on the porch, the quilt around my shoulders. I looked at the lake, its waves endless, and felt whole, not perfect, but enough. To anyone listening, I'd say this: believe you're enough. Start over no matter your age. Share your story. Willow Lake taught me it's never too late to choose yourself, to find your light and shine. I was Margaret, and I was home.